Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. What is sensorality? What does sensorality stabilize? Overall, progressing through a process of analysis to arrive at a functional definition. Senses exist, censorship exists. We're working through the geometric implications of how you spell that. Letters are shapes, shapes are geometric, spelling is geometric. And so a lot of ideas focusing on the big concepts. Last time we talked about closure, and we'll kind of start off with that right now, I guess, and then progressing through our derivation steps, which I have written down after the last episode previous to this one, but focusing on the main topics that come to my mind. And so last time we finished off with this closure, right? If you try to walk in a straight line, you really form some sort of closed path, but you don't really have centralization in the sense of one center. You have foci. And then we had this immediate linguistic, geometric, anatomical result. Eyes are foci, in wanting to emphasize the linguistics, right? You have this irreducibility of sound. Sound is the basis of language. You have this elementality, this irreducibility spacing in which an element or which a letter can occupy. You can see the symmetries of the letters on your screen in the previous episodes, and the ones that will be on the screen in this episode. I present all of these videos as kind of like standalone pieces, but this is part 398 of a derivation, so you might have to look at some other things. And so, regardless, think of how true that is, right? If you try to walk in a straight line, you can't even do so because of the topology and the geometry, and I use both of those words because in all words are what people would say is three-dimensional. You go into math class, we're going to solve this in 2 dimensions, or we're going to solve this in 3 dimensions. Everything's three-dimensional, or again, this fundamental stability of 2, and we're in this open environment, which again leads us to closure. You go into physics class, and they say there are no closed systems. All black bodies radiate. So where is our conceptualization from math class proper to physics class proper? In math class, right, you cannot have area without closure. You cannot have a volume without closure. Pop on over to physics class, density is definite. And so things are located places. We have this measurement interaction limit where the things that are really, really small are finite, are definite. We can't quote unquote probe them. I did want to address the conceptualization of, again, what is happening at CERN, right? These super colliders, where you have stabilization, right? We existed this, what I've called R2, the cosmological microwave background. You had an environment of radiation. And so what people conceptually call light, they really mean radiation, and you have discrete mass moving within a background, or I don't even really like the term background, but within an environment that is radiation. And so when you see ripples off of your stove because of the heat, it's not a heat waving, right? It's the temperature from your stove being hot. Temperature is vibration. Vibration is a limit of rhythm. It's motion, and that movement causes ripples in the radiation. So that's why you see heat, quote unquote, heat waves, but it's the same wave as a gravitational wave or as a light wave. And so the intuition and conceptualization that's presented in physics class is fundamentally wrong, and it's basically just the exact opposite. But because again, you have energy levels, they'll say a photon has an energy level. You cannot model light as a particle, that makes no sense. The motivations for what is presented as particle theory, and a lot of it's just immediately wrong. People don't get, I'm talking physicists, Sean Carroll, Ed Witten at Caltech and Johns Hopkins, like they just say one thing and then the next thing will be immediately contradictory, and they just like don't get that. But we've already worked through all of these things, again, just readdressing stuff that's present for where we're at in our derivation. And so you have natural stabilization, right? When people say a photon has an energy level, mass is discrete, and so that movement is discrete. All of those information chunks that can be radiated outward or can be perceived or transmitted in any way are chunks, are discrete. And so, but that translates, into physics class, people saying energy levels. Photon has a discrete energy level. No, mass is discrete, energy is movement potential. And so energy is not located anywhere, it has no form. It's logically implied by the development of physical theory. And so we have stabilized dynamics, right? The proton and the electron, positive and negative, this fundamental dichotomy of charge. And so when you're at CERN or when you're smashing things together, you're accelerating mass to have a lot of momentum, mass times velocity. And when you smash those things together, they stabilize into new resonance patterns for extremely small amounts of time. But by the nature of them degrading extremely quickly, they're what I would say is not natural. But they're not fundamental, like stabilized dynamics. And so it kind of felt like relevant to talk about that, leading into, again, this connection or a seeming paradox of, we just talked about closure in mathematics, where you can't have volume or area without closure, without some sort of containment, right? What is a gas? Well, it doesn't, right? Our definitions of solid, liquid, and gas is like relevant to closure, right? Solid has a definite volume, a liquid conforms to the volume of its container, a gas has no definite volume. And so these, again, just the conceptualizations of where we're at, matching our linguistics to our conceptualization. And so this fundamental question, we have this concept of closure, these very well-defined physical mathematical equations, realizations, identities, the definition, the formula for a volume, for area, for overall length of just, one-dimensional thing. But all black bodies radiate, so you have no closed systems. Where does that conceptualization resolve? So those were kind of like the big ideas, closure, mapping up with you go to school, they will say all black bodies radiate, which makes sense. That's what you're seeing, is that radiation. When you move, you have a temperature. If you don't eat, you lose weight. A calorie is a unit of heat. How does energy relate to heat? Kind of just popped up. What is a joule to a calorie? But regardless, again, just talking out loud, and the major concepts, principles, physical realities that is present for our derivation. And so all black bodies radiate. We have these stabilized dynamics. Everything is discrete, right? I am an independent object. My notebook is an independent object. It's all made of independent protons and electrons. Protons are made of quarks. We have this fundamental measurement limit. We have this fundamental stability of 2, so we know there is internal dynamic to the electron. But again, how do we have closure? And then how do we have all black bodies radiate and there are no closed systems? So those were the major concepts at the forefront of my mind. Moving on, we can start by stating the fundamental theorem of mathematics. We've been identifying what I've been calling what is a function. We've really been exploring this relationship between existence, what we call a basis, bases, and then some sort of transformation, an operation. You get an output, a range. Is that a function? What is a function? Or one question being, is there a unique relationship between base and range? And then as the conceptualization for what is a function, right? We just connect it logically to something else. A function is a relationship, right? And it is. A function is a process. Whether you're adding, subtracting, right? Do all functions have to have operations? Again, that's a dichotomy we've pointed out at the very beginning. We're back at it. Again, what is the relationship of operation and functionality? But if you look logically or conceptually and saying, is something functioning? Is it working? You're asking, is it functioning? A direct derivation step we've addressed in the past, but you're asking, what does it do? If you're Nike, you just do it. But what's its function is saying, what is its efficacy, or what is it designed? What is it designed to do? And so a function is a process, a function is a relationship. Censorship is containment. What is what contains sensorality? So now we have this chronological proof, speciality, special with an ITY, natural tendency to differentiate for sexual antagonism, infinite uniqueness. But it's our base or our starting point for sensorality. So now we're trying to find or develop into this fundamental inversion, but to solidify the definition of what is sensorality. But what contains sensorality? Is a fraction a function? You put 3 over 4, those symbols mean something. It says you have 3 things divided by 4 things. It's because of discreteness. right? All rational numbers terminate. You can express all rational numbers as a fraction. That's again some sort of derivative truth because of, or theorem, because whole numbers are natural numbers. We have this fundamental discreteness of physical things. If I cut off my left arm, it's still one Brad. Is a function is a fraction a function? Filtration is the function of sensorality. Sensorality filters orality. That is a natural definition. Directionality is chronological. Right, we have these pairs, these three pairs, up, down, left, right, forward, backward. So what's the order? Right? Things happen chronologically. What's the order of directionality? You have something. Again, I don't think I'm going to be able to answer that right here, but moving along. So on the last episode, I had rhyming is wrong on the screen, or we were talking about rhyming is wrong, again, from Fraudulent Eric's theft of intellectual property, and talking about it publicly. But I put undifferentiated, and I just wanted to say explicitly, I put it on the screen, but I felt cumbersome putting undifferentiated, but the conceptualization's fine. But I just said, I created word salad. Moving along, rhythm is to vibration what algorithm is to, because again, all of these ideas we're presenting, we're just progressing forward to a single resolution, a single explanation, a working definition. What is sensorality? Our overall structure of this derivation from rhythm to algorithm. Rhythm is this clear base physical principle. If you want to do something efficiently, you form a rhythm. We know it's true. Everyone blurts out the word rhythm. But vibration is the limit of rhythm, right? If you want to move as efficiently as possible, you form a rhythm. You want to limit movement, you're going to force vibration. And so rhythm is to vibration, vibration being the inverse of rhythm, being the limit of rhythm. Then what is the vibration of algorithm? What is the limit or the inverse of algorithm? Moving along. What activates a sensor? Orality activates sensorality. Another natural definition. Again, developing our linguistics to have this self-contained question, linguistically meaning the letters, but logically producing a new openness or a new progression moving forward. And now this is another, I don't say prediction, but like mapping. Another, we're producing results of forms of verbiage of letters, of language. And so, right, we had the fundamental theorem of communication last time. Language contains logic. Sensorality is a logic gauge, taking gauge directly from language, and the overall, again, elementality, syllability is the direct form of a logic gate, right? Sensorality is a logic gauge. A gate is a gauge, and then people go, your bra and ket notation in quantum mechanics, right? We have a logic gate. We have a logic gauge. And so emphasizing the overall structure of that, of saying. Again, back to this series and sequence. How does that relate to chronology, right? We say sequence, we say sequential, we say sequentiality very naturally. I definitely use at some points series, like the general form of series, which I've used sereticality and serieticality, why is this not a word form I'm confident with? I'm just not sure, but it's definitely, again, what's the difference between a series and a sequence? Why do we say sequentiality, but then serieticality is like, what are you talking about? In some sort of chronological consequence, but is sequentiality scalar? Is serieticality vector? And that was the intuition, just pairing a sequence to a scalar and a series to a vector. Don't know if there's legitimacy to it, but that's what the conceptualization, that's what came to mind. What is exponentiation to differentiation? Emphasizing the word forms. The concepts don't, they have an answer. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Focality, again, that's just a amalgamated word form thing. Foci plus ality, focality, focality. Sensorality is focal. Orality is focal. focal, vocal. Focal is central. So now when we're getting to our foci and our centralization, now we have a focal point. What is center to central? Emphasizing that center does not have an A and central does. Symmetry is congruence. Symmetric is congruent. How? This was just a thought, again, but a direct topological. So again, I say topology and geometry explicitly when I'm talking about shape, because all words are defined in this, again, stabilized 2 components plus 1. Might as well say 3 dimensions. The intuition works fine enough. But they both, again, they're both defined in that environment of quote unquote 3 dimensions, topology and geometry. And so you'll see through my initial derivations, topology, literally, again, language is literal. It means a top. Like if you spin a top, that's well defined. So the study of top is topology, and geometry contains topology. Again, what is meant by those words? But for overall consideration of geometry and topology, how do you optimally pour spaghetti out of a box? Right, you have long cylinders, and everyone who's ever, you know the box you get the spaghetti noodles in, and you try to pour them out, and you're always like, you know, at the end of the box trying not to like snap the noodles and like kill 14 Italians. And so it's like, how do you optimally pour spaghetti out of a box? It's definitely like an intuitive, an immediately appreciable problem that strikes me as very fundamental mathematically all of the time, but worth pointing out. Sensorality focuses vocality. Oral, focal, vocal. Sensorality is foci, and that does not exist. Again, foci is plural, so foci has no meaning. Sensorality is detentionality. Sensorality tends to. Sensorality is detendality. And so this was another, just again, kind of thing that came, again, I don't want to say came to me, but like, I have very clear analytical steps where there's nothing to describe. It's just like the shapes of the letters just moving over. And I'm a human being that's interacted with computers and, you know, writing notebooks. And so it's like I'm visually thinking like a computer screen, and it's just like the shapes of the levers. I'm just like mechanically moving them around. And so I don't want to say it came to me like that. No, it's just like it's a mechanical analytical process. I've just demonstrated it enough now where it's like nothing's really new. I'm just trying to have a pace to a YouTube video. But our direct iteration of sensor to center and to denser, right now, why not do both? Denter. And then, right, dent is a word, a depression, an impression, you get a car dent. But now, denter looks like, again, a word and then ER at the end. But now we can iterate those 2 letters, the T and the D, and we get tender. So now, completely and entirely, I know we said we have to think about it again, but sensorality is sensorality, and we're just working through how we spell that, again, as a geometric consequence. And so, right, we go from sensor, directly iterate that to center, then to denser, then have both letters at the same time, denter, and then we iterate those 2 letters to tender, right? Legal tender is money. Currency tenders. Tender, render. Resolution, renders. Sensorality is denterality, sensorality is tenderality. But now, again, that's a direct logical renormalization. You hear the word sensorality, that's been introduced by Brad, we're resolving that definition, you just think tenderality. What's tender? Again, like soft, oh, my muscle's tender. Oh, again, I give somebody money, that's the actual functional definition that I'm using. But again, all of the just tender, sensorality is tender, tenderality. But if you give somebody money, it's legal tender. Sensorality, and then resolution renders. So are vowels unique? And this was, again, from the proof of, I is not a unique sound. So when we say the question why, or when we say eyes are foci, we're just saying the sound I. And we've associated that sound to mean different things depending on context. If I say I, my eyeball, or if I say I, me. But that raises the question of, right, we said that Y, that it's not a unique, the letter Y representing the sound I is not a unique sound, and it's not. But does that mean all vowels are unique? Just a question that popped up. Uniqueness is sufficient differentiation. Right? What makes you different? What separates you from the crowd? It has to be sufficient to be unique. Consistency is fidelity. Fidelity is fealty. Sensorality is fealtiality. Another kind of archaic word, but it definitely pops up, and you can see again, all of these EA words are fundamental inversions in linguistic progressions that are overwhelmingly and trivial to see at this point. What is fealty to feeling? Again, that emphasizing the EA to the EE. Sexual antagonism teases. Ease erases, teases. Again, just, it's not like you don't need to go from erases to teases, but just showing you the recent use of syllability that we've referenced. But that's what it is. Sexual antagonism is teasing. Sensorality teases. A trailer is a teaser. A teaser is a preview. What is hyphenation to spacing? And hyphenation is a consequence of rhythm, and the word form validates that hyphen looks like rhythm. Rhythm is eases, or rhythm is easy, rhythm eases. That's why you rock a baby. Sensorality produces sensoralities. So now we can address another clear apparent usage or functionality of the English language. A word ends in Y singular, you pluralize it, and then you add an IES. So why do we do that? Or what kind of an analysis or conclusions or insight can we draw with our new progression of linguistics? Singular, right, if you have sensorality, it just produces the sound E, represented by the letter Y. Sensoralities, oh, we just produced the word tease again. T-E-A-S is preserved in the letters T-I-E-S. Right, sensoralities. Anytime you pluralize a word at the end, you're saying the word tease. Massive empirical truth. And just moving along, because we're showing this language iterates, and we've produced this context in which we're going to get a definite definition of sensorality. Plurality teases. What is hyphenation to contraction? Another direct thing, because we produce T-I-E-S. That also produces the syllability, remove the E, iterate the letters, change the order, I-T-S. And so now, right, it is what it is, it's not, or it's what's it's is never said. And then we have this, right, possessive, I-T apostrophe S is always, a contraction. Whereas if you have Johnny's basketball, that's possessive. And so now, how do we do that for the plurality at the end of the word? It's the same syllability, contraction, hyphenation, sensorality, sensoralities. One's plural, one's contraction, one's possessive. Again, just developing our empirical evidence. What is function to work? That was what we addressed earlier at the beginning. What is a function? A function is a relationship. A function is a process. And so that is what I have for the derivation as of right now. Again, all black bodies radiate. That might be racist. What about white bodies? We have white noise. What about black noise? Black noise matter. and white bodies radiate. But again, this overall concept of how does closure, mathematically and physically, but systems aren't closed, right? There's a gap, there's a mass gap. But I'm still me, my arm's still me, but these are discrete things bonded, they're sharing electrons. It's a stabilized dynamic. An electron's a stabilized dynamic, protons are stabilized dynamic, the collective Brad is a stabilized dynamic. Again, that's where we're at with our derivation, ultimately looking to show the iteration and stabilize what is sensorality. So my rights continue to be violated. I continue to beg. Truly, my life quality is zero. I'm a grown-ass man without the ability to properly eat, sleep, and work. And that's just, I've been begging. I just say it at the end of every video because it's true. And there's nothing else to say. There's no one to call, and there's nothing to do. So at some point, somebody has to stop abusing me, and I just don't think that's possible. That is what I have for now. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.